Oxford, home of the greatest book in the English language, full of mysteries, comic plots, intrigue and astounding facts. The Oxford English Dictionary tells us what words mean and where they came from. Together, we've launched a new word hunt. We've asked you to send us written evidence of the earliest recorded date for some of our most colourful words and phrases. But will what you send us stand up to the scrutiny of the mighty gatekeepers of the dictionary? Would it help if I pleaded more? With your help, scores of entries in the OED have already been rewritten. But the challenge is not over yet. This week, the dictionary's asked for our help with the language of rogues and scamps, rapscallions and scallywags. Hang on. Rogues, scamps, scallywags? They all sound very jolly. We're talking about criminals. Do we think breaking the law is fun? Our language suggests that we do. On the hunt for dodgy dealers, Suggs goes in search of the very first Jack the Lad.
What does the phrase Jack the Lad mean to you?
White boy geezer.
Bit of a bounder, bit of a cad.
Probably not my kind of guy.
Neil Oliver explores the dark side of Glasgow on a kiss chase.
Have you, in your time, Walter, ever administered a Glasgow kiss?
Oh, aye.
And I'm hopped on the highly polished heels of the Spiv.
Dodgy. Full of or addicted to dodges. Evasive, tricky, artful. 1861.
We all know what dodgy means these days. If you've ever bought a dodgy motor or just felt a bit dodgy, you'll know it means shifty, iffy, a bit strange. It's certainly not quite right, but it's not totally wrong either. And therein lies our love of dodginess. We're not completely condemning, but taking a certain pleasure in departing from the straight and narrow. The British have a soft spot for scoundrels, like Del Boy, Arthur Daly or the Mitchell brothers. They're all rogues, but lovable rogues. And so is Jack the Lad. Now, how long has the phrase been around? Balderdash and Piffle asked incorrigible Jack the Lad, Suggs, to go on a word hunt.
What for you is a Jack the Lad?
Someone's ducking and diving.
Bit of a gigolo, really. Knows what he's doing.
A bit like yourself.
Hold on.
Mr. Know-it-all, salt of the earth kind of character. But in a good way.
Totally confident, big on the girls. You know, everyone knows it. Really sort of, probably not my kind of guy.
I've been known as a bit of a Jack the Lad in my time. You know, a little bit this, a little bit that. Roguish charm, living on your wits. But where did the phrase Jack the Lad originate? Well, the dictionary tells us that the name Jack had roguish connotations right from its beginning as a nickname for the more formal John. And in the 16th century, the name came to mean a fellow of low breeding and ill manners, even if your real name was Graham. A Jack was a knave, such as the notoriously dodgy tarts dealer, the Jack of Hearts in a pack of cards. Shakespeare talked about playing the Jack, meaning doing a nasty trick, which I think someone has with ease. And Jack in the Box originally meant a cheat or a thief. So Jack's been a bit of a lad for centuries, but when was the phrase first used? Popular mythology has it that the original Jack the Lad was a notorious thief called Jack Shepherd who lived right here in Spitalfields in the 18th century. But there's jack-all proof the phrase refers to him. What the Oxford English Dictionary need is evidence to pin down the right date for the phrase. Their first reference to Jack the Lad is very recent, 1981. So Balderdash and Piffle appealed for your help. Alan Walsh contacted the word hunt because he thinks he remembers it from the 1950s.
I was in the Navy in the late 50s and early 60s for 8 years, and in that time the expression Jack the Lad was certainly a common one. Usually referred to someone who sort of dodged and weaved his way through his service in the Navy, making it work for him. Jack goes back centuries, referring to naval ratings. Jolly Jack, Jack Tar, Jack Proof, you could say. That was another one. That was some piece of equipment or something which had been tested such that it was all right to let the sailors loose on it. But certainly that phrase, Jack the Lad, was in common use in the Navy in the 50s and 60s, but never saw it written down.
Not good enough for the dictionary, they need written evidence. And the word hunt has tipped me off on not one, but 15 examples.
Just 'cause I ain't never had no nothing worth having, never ever, never, ever. You ain't got no call not to think I wouldn't fall into thinking I ain't too clever.
Phew. Well, I think we've hit the jackpot. In Oliver Reed's autobiography from 1979, he describes himself as Bully Boy Reed, Jack the Lad. Melvyn Bragg's 1974 novel describes someone as a Jack the Lad, all right. And the phrase also appears in the Mirror and the Times. It pops up all over the shop. Our old chums at the dictionary may be well read in Shakespeare and Chaucer, but they're obviously not looking in the right places when it comes to popular culture. Jack the Lad's been mentioned in loads of songs, from Elvis Costello to punk band Sham 69.
It's a Montana shot. That's where I got now. Jack the Lad.
And my old mate, People's Poet Laureate, real London Jack the Lad, Mr. Ian Jury. You know, Clever Trevor. Even if I had, I'm a bit of a Jack the Lad.
Even if I had, I'm a bit of a Jack the Lad.
So why does Jack the Lad keep popping up in music? There's one person who ought to have an opinion. Ray Laidlaw, the drummer in a band formed in 1973 with the name Jack the Lad. So Ray, a very notable band, Jack the Lad, where did the name come from?
Well, in early 1973, I was in a band called Lindisfarne, and we were touring Australia with Status Quo and Slade. It was a bit of an iffy tour, up and down, you know, and the promoters were white boys, basically. You know, kept disappearing without paying hotel bills and that sort of stuff. Every time they came into our presence, the Status Quo boys would come burst into song, you know, and it was like, International Jack the Lad. When we were looking for a name for our new band, a few months later, that was the one we chose because it just summed up the band. Our band was sort of quite a good time band, but we didn't all play by the rules.
The band Jack the Lad beats the dictionary by 8 years, but we can do better. So what, I hear you ask, is the earliest evidence we've found? Well, according to word hunters up and down the country, it's another musical connection, the film performance released in 1970. Starring Mick Jagger and James Fox in a classic meeting of sharp-dressed gangsters and rock and roll weirdos. Let's have a look.
Making him say that thing about his poor dead father? My
Let's
God.
have this little chat upstairs, shall we?
Who do you think you are? The Lone Ranger?
I know who I am, Harry.
Of course you do, son. You're Jack the Lad.
There it is. He definitely says Jack the Lad in 1970. And that beats the dictionary for definite by 11 whole years. And I'll tell you what, whether it refers to waggish sailors, roguish folk heroes like Jack Shepherd, or just rock and roll chancers like myself, there's nothing wrong with being a Jack the Lad.
You're Jack the Lad. You're Jack the Lad. You're Jack the Lad.
Well, that went very well. Gave us an 11-year anti-dating for Jack the Lad. This dodgy word hunt is going great guns. We also appealed for TWOC, a police acronym of the phrase taken without consent, usually applied to car theft or joyriding. The dictionary had 1990, but word detective Philip Creed got in touch to suggest we look at this old murder mystery companion from 1977, and sure enough, It's in there. So we've got an anti-dating for that as well. Place names frequently enter the language for things which are peculiar to that region. Oxford, for example, is applied to marmalade, shirts, bags, and, of course, dictionaries. Look up Glasgow and you'll find a kiss. That sounds nice. Neil Oliver went on the trail of a very dodgy piece of social interaction.
It started with a kiss. The back row of the classroom. How could I receive?
I can't quite claim to belong to Glasgow, but my dad's a Glaswegian and I went to university here. I've also lived here many times, so I know the place well. But I have never given or received a Glasgow kiss. And that's no bad thing, because a Glasgow kiss is no amorous embrace, it's a headbutt. I think it's an old expression. I certainly remember hearing it at school, but the dictionary says it's no older than 1987. I'm sure it's way older than that, and I'm determined to prove it. Kiss. If I was to use the expression to you, a Glasgow kiss, what would it say to you?
You're going to headbutt me.
Right. Oh, God forbid.
Stick your head in somebody.
Yeah. What was that?
Just stick your head in somebody.
Don't want one.
No, you do not. Where are you from?
Stornoway.
And you've never heard of a Glasgow
Never
kiss?
heard of a Glasgow kiss before.
Must be much more genteel up there. As an archaeologist, I'm used to digging for evidence. But this time, my quest is a bit different.
Kiss me, honey, honey, kiss me.
It's not fragments of armour or old pots I'm after, but words written down. Word hunters suggested that in my search for Glasgow kiss, I should get in touch with Michael Munro, author of a book about Glasgow slang, The Patter. So what's the source of the richness of Glasgow slang?
Glasgow's been a major port, a major industrial centre, so it's had people coming in and out from all different areas of the world, and that makes for a lively local language.
What about Glasgow kiss? Does that make it into the Bible?
It didn't make it into the original edition of the Patter, which came out in 1985.
Right.
But 3 years later, with the Patter Another Blast, I got it in there. The main definition is a Glasgow nod, which I say is a slang term for a headbutt, and it's also known as the Glasgow kiss. Never mind arguing with the Diddy, give him the Glasgow nod.
Diddy, that's another great one for a person of low intelligence. Glasgow's got a particularly rich line in, insults for people who are thought to be stupid, like numpty and heed the ball and bampot. It's a confrontational language.
It is a threat in Glasgow is to burst somebody. Beat it or I'll burst you.
Michael has 42 entries in the OED, thanks to the Patter. But his Glasgow kiss doesn't beat the dictionary. But, as we say in the Patter, if at first you don't succeed, in with the boot and then with the heed. Kiss. I'll tell you one thing I've noticed. Glasgow slang doesn't often seem to be about anything soft or fluffy. Take, for example, a malky. That's rhyming slang from Malcolm Fraser, razor. So a malky is any weapon used to stab or slash. You can also call that a chib. Chib can be a verb, though, also meaning to stab or to slash. And what about asbo, the very recent and universal British term, first cited, according to the Oxford English Dictionary, by the Glasgow Herald? What is it about this place?
So you've come to Glasgow, have you? Pretty grim, isn't it?
Years before Glasgow cleaned up its act, the city had a thoroughly dodgy reputation. Ever since the Depression of the 1920s and 30s, when poverty and unemployment had a devastating effect, slums and gangs became the enduring images of the place. For a long time, Glasgow was almost synonymous with violence. One of Glasgow's most notorious gang leaders was Walter Norval, known as the Godfather.
Walter, how you doing?
After a lifetime of crime and doing time, if anyone knows if the gangs used Glasgow kiss, it's him. Walter, how violent were the Glasgow gangs when you were growing up?
It was violent, especially the weekends. The weekends, there was always battles, And there was sometimes some gang would come up to attack the gangs in your district, and then your gangs would get together and go away to attack them in their districts. And it went on like that for years.
Did you use weapons, or was it just
we had a place called the Tower, that's what they called our gang. And in the Tower was a snooker hall. So we used to break the queues and get the bottom end of the queue. It was like a button. Bricks. We used to hit each other with bricks and that, you know. When the late 40s that came, the blades started coming out, and then went for razor slashing to stabbings, ended up in shootings. Now it's guns, innit?
From the point of view of Glasgow slang, was there a form of slang that was used by the gangs?
If somebody hit somebody with his head, they didn't say hit him with his head, they would say put the loaf on him. That was kind of slang talk, you know. And if a guy get slashed, he chibbed him. That was him chibbed. And if a guy just maybe in a pub some night punched a guy, you say he gubbed him. That's the kind of talk that came away with. It was just natural talk that way.
And what about a Glasgow kiss?
It was never used. What they would say, the Glasgow kiss meant sticking the head in somebody, you know. But in our days, as I told you, it was stuck the loaf in them.
Have you, in your time, Walter, ever administered a Glasgow kiss?
Oh, aye.
If Walter didn't use Glasgow kiss, the phrase must be newer than I'd thought. But we still need evidence to pin it down. I had expected that Glasgow's gangsters would lead me to the holy grail of evidence, but in fact, salvation came to the word hunt from a very unlikely source, from a man dressed all in white, the Pope. The Pope was fond of kissing, although not usually the Glasgow variety. He visited the city in 1982, and it was recorded in the Daily Mirror. It says, Glasgow has its own way of welcoming people. All too often, particularly if it is near closing time, there is a broken bottle gripped in the fist of greeting. Or there's the Glasgow kiss, a sharp whack on the nose with the forehead. So there it is, evidence from 1982 of Glasgow kiss precisely defined. Obviously, in 1982, Glasgow still had a thoroughly dodgy reputation. That might be bad news for the city, but it's good news for the word hunt because it means we've beaten the dictionary by 5 whole years.
Kiss. Thugs are more than dodgy, and historically they were really nasty.
Kill for the love of killing! Kill for the love of curry! Kill! Kill! Kill!
The word originally comes from India. Thugs, with a capital T, were a professional group of robbers and murderers, notorious for strangling their victims. From 1831, the thugs were suppressed in India, but Britain inherited the word. At least our own homegrown thugs aren't quite so nasty as the people who gave them their name. Back on the word hunt, we've got another success with that new crime, identity theft, which we've brought back from 1991 to 1989. But before I take all our evidence to the dictionary, I'm investigating one more word hunt.
Spiv, a man who lives by his wits and has no regular employment. One engaging in petty black market dealings and frequently characterised by flashy dress. 1934.
We got ourselves a mystery here, fellas. Our client, a Mr. Dictionary, has put us on the trail of a certain spiv. Nobody knows where the word comes from. Suggestions include a Romany word for sparrow, VIPs backwards, and a police abbreviation for suspected persons and itinerant vagrants. But we don't know. And we don't know if it's really from 1934, like the good book says. It's a mystery, all right. But if we're quick-witted, we just might solve it. A more likely theory is that it comes from the 19th century words spiff and spiffy, meaning to be smartly dressed. Being a proper spiv requires natty clothing. The slicked back hair, the smart pencil moustache, a wide tie, ideally with a naked lady on it, a snazzy suit with high and fulsome trousers, and shiny, snappy shoes. If you were spiffy, you were smart, you looked sharp. But these are double-edged words. Smart talker, sharp practice. Do these phrases fill you with trust? The number of double meanings in the language suggests that the British will be suspicious of someone just because he dresses well. A smart, sharp person, one senses, is looking for opportunities to take advantage. And so were the spivs. A spiv wasn't just a flashy dresser. He was a petty criminal. During the war, and in the austere period afterwards, when everything was rationed and one ate an unremitting diet of powdered egg, the spiv was the flash, brash wheeler-dealer who could get you a pair of nylons or some extra butter on the sly. Nylons! Lovely nylons! 10 bob in the shops. Just 5 to you, madam. Nylons. What about you, sir? Treat for the lady. Lovely pair of nylons. Oh, there's the cops. One typical spiv, Private Joe Walker in Dad's army.
I'll get you the rifles, as many as you want. 18 quid a time.
Out of the question, Walker.
But where do they come from? Well, you don't ask, do you? I mean, you know, he's a very good mate of mine, this geezer. I mean, he's very reliable, you know. He used to knock them off for the IRA. But, I mean, since he's going to our country, he's prepared to throw in 10 rounds per magazine, you know, special offer.
I'm sorry.
The 40s were spivvy times. So spivvy that every dame on every street could find her collar felt when all she wanted was a cheap pair of stockings and an extra loaf from the geezer in the sharp, dark hat. Spivvy times breeds spivvy lingo. Wide boys sneaked into the language in 1937, no questions asked. And no questions asked crept in just over a decade later. But spiv was first, hot off the press in 1934, hot as a hot potato in the mouths of the dictionary screws who asked the Balderdash word detectives if they could track it down any earlier. Hard nut word hunter and slang expert Jonathan Green took the case. Jonathan, you wrote to us about the word spiv. What have you got?
Spiv, right. Well, we have a book here, which is by a man called Charles George Gordon. It's called Crooks of the Underworld. He has a chapter about what he calls jimmers. But what jimmers do is defraud railways. Mace the Rattler, as it used to be known. Mm-hmm. And here we are on page 230, and he's talking about the way people might wish to rob the trains by not paying the ticket. And here he has, supposing a clique of Manchester, quotes, spives were coming down to London. Can I offer that to you?
Ooh, it's got an E on the end. Spives, it says.
The fact that spiv here is spelt with an E, to me, matters not a damn. This is exactly what a spiv, as we know, does. It's this petty larceny, it's defrauding people and so on. That's a spiv.
And this is from, what's the publication date?
1929.
Ooh, so that's actually a 5-year anti-dating.
And therefore, that seems to me to be a nice, early, I would suggest, first dating of this wonderful word.
Hell, the boy done good. A 5-year anti-dating to take to the dictionary. Even if the spelling of spiv is dodgy enough to make a picky dame like me choke on her powdered egg. But can we do even better? Word hunter Martin Pitt from Sheffield has sent us not one but 4 earlier uses of spiv. They're all from the Daily Mirror and relate to an intriguing character named Spiv Bagster. The earliest is from August the 23rd, 1904. That would be a 30-year anti-dating.
Spiv Bagster, the Victoria Station newsboy, is back to his old haunts again. Between 11 and 12 on Saturday night, he was seen dodging about the station yard, stopping people, to whom he offered a ring, which he made a pretence of picking up. A police sergeant heard Bagster say to one gentleman that he just found a good ruby ring, which he would sell for 6 shillings. He found on him a brass ring marked 18-carat cold, set with red glass. Bagster was remanded.
So there are 2 possibilities, my word-hunting friends. Either this Bagster was nicknamed Spiv because of his dodgy dealings, which would mean that the word was already around even before 1904. Or he was nicknamed Spiv for different reasons, in which case He was so notorious, maybe his name became the word for flashy crooks. We could be looking at the original Spiv himself. We could have ourselves a solution to this mystery. Mr. Dictionary hired the right people. Oh, yes. Nothing gets past the word hunt. And now for the moment when we see how well we've done with the very respectable and undodgy gatekeepers of the dictionary. They've been scouring all the evidence we've got.
Let's see what we've got here. Here we are, Spives. With an E, Spivs, Spives.
No, wait a minute.
So this is a group of white boys that have something running some sort of scout.
Who is Spiv Bagster? We need to know.
Who do you think you are? The Lone Ranger?
I know who I am, Harry.
Of course you do, son. You're Jack the Lad.
Twock. Let's have a look. There you are, taking without consent.
Glasgow Kiss.
Yeah.
A sharp whack on the nose with the forehead. 1982, and our earliest so far is...
87.
So how did we do? Well, we've thrown lots of evidence at you this week. What's got through?
Well, you got 4 clear anti-datings in dodgy dealings. Glasgow Kiss, identity theft, Twock and Jack the Lad. So that's great. I was glad to see Jack the Lad taken back to 1970.
That's great. Now, the nattily dressed rogue. Peter, let me ask you about the word spiv.
Well, you gave us spive, but it might be spiv. I mean, words like give and live pronounced that way, and it's 1929, which takes it back significantly earlier, if it's the same thing. And, well, we might have to look into it.
Well, you say look into it. I mean, they're buying dodgy platform tickets and getting on trains which they haven't paid for. That is the same thing, really, isn't it?
It's a particular kind of dodgy dealing. It's in the right area, I think, isn't it?
I think it sounds good to me. I mean, our first quotation at the moment is just defining Spiv as a petty crook who'll turn his hand to anything, and that's what these ticket scammers are doing, really, isn't it? I think they're Spivs.
Yeah, I think we're happy with that one.
Yeah.
Yeah, a good result.
So Spives is in. Even more exciting, though, would be if we could get it back to 1904 with Spiv Baxter.
Yes, Spiv does seem to have been quite a character. We've done a little bit of sneaky research on this. He seems to have been fairly notorious. We know Spiv was his nickname. From one report, we know his name was Henry Bagster. Now, the question is, why does he have this